John and I met back in October 1960 when we were giving life to what became known as Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And as you can tell from the name, we had adopted as students what Martin Luther King Jr. Had adopted from Mahatma Gandhi, and that is the whole philosophy of nonviolence. John Lewis had internalized it. He just believed deep down inside that turning the other cheek was required in order to fulfill your lives as Christians, believing he grew up Baptist, and also in order to facilitate the civil rights activities of the 60s.
Number one, he walked the walk. And I'm not saying others have not. I'm just saying that it's one thing, many of us can talk and deliver great speeches, but to actually walk the walk and talk the talk is something that makes everyone who is a leader stand out in my judgment. So he personified that all the way through and through. He also was very concerned about those coming behind him, meaning young people. And so whenever he saw young people, he never missed an opportunity to encourage them. And I think that is an important attribute. Now, when you think about the fact that he was beaten almost to an inch of his life, very few people can say that. That also created a different distinction. I would say that applies to Dr. C.G. Vivian as well, because he was beaten by Jim Clark. And the fact that the two of them transitioned on the same day. Perhaps they marched on to a different level or a different realm together.
Of all the people, he probably truly believed most fundamentally that nonviolence was a way of life. I mean, it was not an issue with him. I mean, it was for him, it was not an intellectual discussion, it was an emotional discussion. It was about his philosophy of life. And so we decided that the work that we had to do, which was to end segregation, could hold two thoughts at the same time. One, that nonviolence was a way of life, and nonviolence was a tactic. I mean, my sense is that within the Black community, there is a continuum, and that one group of one generation does what it can to make a better circumstance, and the next generation takes it forward. So there is no difference between, what's going on in Minneapolis and what was going on in Tennessee. They were all trying to deal with the same problem. Different circumstance, different time, maybe different issue, but the same problem.
This is an interesting time. And it might mean that we must recommit ourselves to finish the unfulfilled work. My dad wanted to see, freedom, justice, and equality become real for all humankind. And maybe we can achieve that. Maybe we're at a point where this is the time that we can achieve that. I know that's certainly what John Lewis would want us to do.
House Resolution 1054 resolved that the House has heard with profound sorrow of the death of the Honorable John Lewis, a representative from the state.
I talked to a couple other people on the floor who were taken aback by the way how emotional she got reading that resolution. But John affected people that way. In fact, when I did my tribute to him the morning after he passed, last Saturday morning, I did so at sunrise. I couldn't stay asleep, so I got up and I paid my tribute to him. And when I was asked about it later in the day, after he had gone out to all the media sources, I was on air with someone. When they asked me about the tribute, I just was overcome by emotions. But John affected people that way. This guy lived when he preached. My dad used to say to me all the time, he thought the world would much rather see a sermon than to hear one. Well, in John, you saw a sermon.
And having watched year after year as so many foot soldiers like John Lewis would make the pilgrimage to Brown Chapel to reenact Bloody Sunday, and just to remind us and inspire us as to what took place on that bridge and how ordinary Alabamians, Americans, literally working together in a nonviolent way brought about amazing social change, not only in this nation, but in this world, because it was their tenacity, their courage, their bravery that led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And in fact, the civil rights and voting rights movement really spurred human rights movements around the world.
John Robert Lewis was the connective tissue between the civil rights movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. John Robert Lewis was the connective tissue between the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the presidency of Barack Obama. And John Robert Lewis was the connective tissue between the tragedy on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the tragedy that occurred in Minneapolis, Minnesota. John Robert Lewis's life's journey is the American journey, and he's guided the way as we've traveled and marched toward a more perfect union, and through the sheer will of his morality has helped to bend the arc toward justice.
It's going to be hard because I know that he was such the conscience of the Congress, that he had such a presence about him, and he was willing to lend that voice to so many causes, not just civil rights and voting rights. In recent years, it was Black Lives Matter. He also lended his voice to immigration and the Dreamers, the gun violence issue, the fact that I got in my lifetime to do a sit-in with John Lewis on the House floor.
We can no longer be patient. So today we come to the well of the House to dramatize the need for action. Not next month, not next year, but now. We have to occupy the floor of the House until there's action.
And I have to know that he has sowed so many wonderful seeds of hope and inspiration in others that we will have many, many, many more elected officials, appointed officials. People will take seriously that charge of John's, that the vote is precious, that it is the most important nonviolent tool in our democracy.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.